My name is Andrea Ulrich. I'm the Deputy Director of Programs at Development Gateway in IREX Venture. We work with CC on managing the Tobacco Control Data Initiative. The tobacco industry uses a number of strategies around the world, and we've seen this over time, over continents. They might apply it in different country contexts, but really the strategies are repeated over and over again. So one of the patterns we'll see is discrediting science, right? So established evidence, they will try to cast doubt on it or otherwise produce information that counters established evidence. The other strategy that we see, which is obviously concerning, is that they will threaten governments with litigation or even provide a threat of litigation in order to counter governments trying to pass legislation or even trying to enact legislation that's already been approved. The other element that we see that's very concerning is that they will establish front groups or work through third parties who will look like they are supporting farmers, for example, have other social objectives, but at the end of the day, their main goal is providing an opportunity for the tobacco industry to have influence or to have a perception by the public that they're doing social good. So again, these are all different ways that the tobacco industry tries to block tobacco control efforts, and it's really important that we're aware of them so that we can effectively combat these strategies being played out. So an example of how they're applying these strategies is that, for example, if we look at Nigeria, they are specifically marketing toward women and girls. And they have industry internal documents that we've seen that say that this is an underserved market. And so when they say underserved market, we mean that they're trying to get more customers. And so we see greater advertising that is trying to advocate for or represent women who are empowered, being able to do that through smoking. So obviously that's a big concern for us. So the reason that we need to keep our eyes on misinformation as well as these industry strategies is that this is all designed to make tobacco control legislation or reform or practices less effective. And this directly impacts the health of the population. We know that cigarettes, for example, are the only legally available consumer product that kill half their customers. And this is a serious problem, so any effort that we can make at strengthening tobacco control will improve population as well as economic outputs. For every 1,000 naira that the industry generates through agricultural productivity or economic output, they cause a loss of 3,000 naira because of health and other loss of productivity. So we know that this is important not just from a health perspective, but looking at the long-term economic success of the countries we're working in. So it's important that despite hearing the strategies of the industry, despite the fact that they may be well-funded, they cannot represent us as a population, as a citizenry. They cannot, for example, in Nigeria, they cannot combat 240 million individual voices rising up. And I think it's important that we recognize the power that citizens have in not just accessing information, but representing what it is that they're concerned about and what their priorities are. After all, many of the misinformation tactics are designed to change perception. So what's important if you are an individual who maybe isn't a researcher or a policymaker and you're wondering, what can I do that makes a difference? When you're looking at research, especially research online, look at where it's coming from. Who is funding the research? What is research or information saying? And it's important to do a critical analysis of any source of information you're reviewing, because when you do that, you're then applying a critical thinking lens to evaluate, to see if the source is something that's reputable and if it's evidence that you can carry forward into your decision making. And that's something that we at the Tobacco Control Data Initiative have worked very hard in combination with CC, with researchers, think tanks around multiple countries is we're evaluating, is the research we're finding accurate? We submit for multiple revisions, multiple reviews from academics, from boards, from doctors, from others who are evaluating the accuracy of our statements. So if you go to the Tobacco Control Data Initiative website, you're going to find information that has been vetted and that you can trust. And you can find this information through tobaccocontroldata.org. I'm glad you mentioned the 3x35 initiative. That is a movement that we're very excited about. It was announced by the World Health Organization to increase the real prices of 3 products, tobacco, alcohol, and sugary drinks, by 50% by 2035. And by doing so, that can raise much needed revenue, especially for health departments, as well as save lives and improve the economy. So we're really looking at a win-win-win. There's very few policies available that have very positive outcomes like these. And we want to put our voice in looking at this from an evidence perspective. So we know that, for example, increasing the real price of products, for example, tobacco, will lead to a decrease in the number of smokers. And smokers who currently smoke will smoke fewer cigarettes. So that's a positive outcome we see in the literature. And then finally, individuals who are considering smoking will choose not to smoke when there are higher real prices. So we know from the research, that's what the data is telling us. But what's very exciting is if we follow through worldwide on this 3x35 initiative, we can see an increase in $3.7 trillion in terms of revenue raised. And that can also lead to 11 million lives being saved. So no matter how you look at this perspective, I think it's important that we really put effort behind looking into initiatives like these that have positive outcomes on the economy and on our populations. So I love thinking about the future tobacco control because that's where we look to the future, all of our future, which is really the youth. So the youth population has a ton of energy, drive. They are passionate about living in a world where they can breathe easier, where they are healthy, where they have access to jobs, right? And we see this as very much tied to tobacco control efforts. So the more that we can see and spotlight young advocates who are doing tobacco control work, that's going to be leading our country and our continent toward even better future. So I'm very excited for future advocates to take on much of this work and to see where the future holds. Well, we're excited for the future of this collaboration. We're so excited also for the leadership that CC is bringing as the new managers of the Tobacco Control Data Initiative. They're bringing forward new features, new ways to present data and evidence even more effectively to the public. So we can't wait to see what that will bring. And happy World No Tobacco Day. Happy World Health Day.